wedding workers. What made you think a marriage would end in divorce? Story 1. Not sure if this belongs here, since I'm really sure that they got divorced after. But anyway, I was helping out at my parents' restaurant, where a huge wedding party was hosted. I was busy serving drinks and suddenly loud yelling and screaming started right behind me. It turns out the bride had somehow found out that the groom had hooked up with her sister right before the wedding ceremony, and apparently on a few occasions before. And in her anger, she poked him in the chest with a dinner fork several times. We had to call an ambulance and the police. It was awful. Edit. I didn't expect this story to become so popular, but since a bunch of people asked, I just called my mom and asked about this story. And apparently, the former bride's parents are still regular guests at my parents' restaurant. Not for weddings though. And according to my mother, they told that the groom and the bride's sister now actually have 2 children together and are planning on getting married, but had to cancel their wedding multiple times because of what was going on in the world in the year of 2019. Edit 2. Since a bunch of people asked, no, I don't know what happened to the bride or how she and her family get along now. And neither does my mom. I don't think she went to jail for this though. She probably got sentenced to a fine or probation for dangerous bodily harm. This story takes place in Germany. Opinion: if he ain't worthy of spooning, just fork him. Story 2. It was the 3rd time the bride had hired me, and all the guys had been carbon copies. Opinion: she clearly had a type. It wasn't working, but she wasn't about to let that hold her back. Story 3. Photographing the groom, and you see his eyes light up when a guest arrives. You look over and it's a cute woman in a short dress. He smiles, walks up to the woman, picks her up, and swings her in his arms. Best smile I captured of the groom all day. Marriage didn't last 6 months from what I've heard. Opinion: at least the second wedding seems promising. Story 4. All the time. You know how they say 50% of weddings end in divorce? I can pretty much predetermine who that 50% is going to be with about 98% accuracy. I bake wedding cakes for a living. I own my own bakery, but I have also worked in a country club kitchen, doing basically the same thing plus other pastry chef duties day of weddings. I've seen them both for the testing/design consultation and on their wedding day. I see how they interact when they're just together, but also when under the stress of the big day. I have seen everything. Lots of cheating, lots of drunks, lots of terrible mothers. Once had a mama's boy who ignored his wife when they were supposed to be having their cake tasting to cuddle their mother and hand feed her cake. His mother was not supposed to be there, and you could tell the bride was angry. By the end of it, he had kissed his mother on the lips multiple times. Divorce. Have seen a woman complain about everything her fiancé said. Any suggestions he had for what he liked resulted in him being called stupid. Anytime she would open her mouth, he would cower and flinch. Their cake actually got cancelled about a month before the wedding, so we didn't get anything but the deposit, even though we had started baking it. First time I lost out on money and I've been relieved. Once, had this arrogant, a-hole Turkish guy marrying into this Bangladeshi family. Bride was sweet, about 10 years older than him, and came from a fairly well-off family. Generally got the impression that this being a Turk/South Asian marriage was kind of a big deal, even though they were both Muslim. But since she was 30-something, they wanted her to get married, so they allowed it. Guy complains about everything during the planning process, especially over them not serving alcohol. He is generally rude to us, but is just straight up cruel to her. Like, at one point, when we were meeting, I asked about her wedding dress because South Asian wedding dresses are gorgeous. She's showing me this amazing dress and he says straight up, I don't know why she picked that one. She looks fat and old in it. Every other woman is going to be more beautiful than her on her wedding day. He then shows me this dress he picked out, which isn't traditional South Asian style at all, and is very Western and very fugly, and basically makes the model in the picture look naked. It's so sheer. When she says something about how no mosque would let her in, dressed like that, and her traditions are important, he just sneered and said she should get over it, and her traditions weren't that important. Divorce red flag. Found out later they didn't last a day. From the way the servers tell it, midway through the reception, the guy raises his hand to his new bride when she asks him a question about being drunk, and she flinches and turns away, protecting her face. He grabs her by the arm and rips her around, angry. Her mother and aunt were standing 3 feet from her and lost their effing minds, realizing what must have been happening there. His response when mom started to lose her mind on him was to hit the mother. So in the middle of this very big 600 plus person Bangladeshi wedding, this 20-something outsider a-hole no one wanted her to marry anyway, smacked a well-respected woman in their community. There was a brawl, the cops were called, marriage was annulled. Edit. Because so many of you are asking, baking a cake in the weeks leading up to the event is standard. You bake these sponge triple wrap and flash freeze. Frozen cakes are actually much less likely to taste dry or gross, because if you fresh bake, they will be sitting out for days on end until they can be decorated and absorb whatever smells are in the refrigerator and dry out. Typically, we also will cover them in simple syrup after thawing, but before assembly, which is why bakery cakes are so much more moist than a lot of homemade ones. I've been working as a baker since I was 15, and this is very much the practice of every place I've ever worked when it comes to celebration cakes. Opinion. It's great to see the mom and the aunt stand up for her. Story 5. I worked fine dining catering for over 20 years, so I've worked lots of weddings and receptions. I once heard a bride at the reception during the toasts say that she actually thought she was asking out the groom's twin brother on their first date, and that might actually be cute, except she just kept going on how the twin was more compatible, etc. Then she ended the toast with, well, as nice as you are, you will make a great first husband. I was walking past the cameraman at the time and you can hear me on the tape saying, did you get that? Tell me you got that. Opinion. I really want to believe this is some kind of inside joke between them that most, if not all, the guests knew about. Story 6. Wedding DJ here. Had a wedding a few years ago where the groom was a total a-hole. When it was his turn to make a speech, he refused to make one. When the bride's sister begged him to please make a speech or at least just tell the bride she looked beautiful, he got up, took the mic, mumbled to her that she looked beautiful, and sat back down. When I left after the wedding was done, I was walking to my van with some gear and then I saw the bride sitting on the side crying. Found out a few days later that the groom hit her 3 days before the wedding, and he tried to hit her at the wedding again when she asked him to not drink so much and to pace himself. Opinion. Reading the first paragraph I'm thinking, well, maybe he's just shy. Not everyone handles public speaking well. By the end of the second, I'm like, F this guy, what a POS. Story 7. Not actually in the industry, but I have helped out a friend with a few weddings. Two of the weddings I could just tell they weren't going to make it. At the first wedding, the bride and groom hardly talked the entire wedding. It was like they had nothing in common. And then later, the groom pretty much F's off halfway through and went home because, I quote, he was tired. So he just left his bride having to take pictures with the wedding guests on her own. He never came back that evening, so she had to greet everyone off, etc. Funny enough, about a year later, I heard they're filing for divorce. Another time was actually last summer, just before the wedding speeches. The groom went to hang out with his friends for like half an hour, leaving the bride sitting there alone and delaying the speeches. Then right after the bride and groom cut the cake, he once again went to go hang out with his friends and abandoned his wife. So she was left alone having to mingle with all the guests, and he made no interaction with her side of the guests. He stuck with his friends the rest of the evening. His wife basically had to go and beg him to come and take more wedding pictures. At one point in the evening, he actually went for a drive with his friends for about an hour, and his wife had no idea where he was. I mean, I get wanting to mingle with your friends at your wedding, but not even mingle with your wife's family or friends on your wedding day seems quite rude. Opinion. As a shy introvert, even I know I need to put on my brave pants and mingle at my own event. He seems quite immature. Story 8. I perform ceremonies as an officiant and no other officiants. The worst, in my humble opinion, are the weddings that are just a bad idea. The couple is young, inexperienced, and selfish. I mean, even courthouse weddings can last decades. But if you have a wedding that is clearly not planned out, they are often not thought out as well. Weddings that are rebellious as a "F you, daddy, I am 19, and marry who I want." I give about 2 years, especially if the bride and groom are out of sync with one another, or one just looks like this was the other's idea primarily. Oddly enough, weddings with cheesy themes, Star Wars, Elvis, etc., last longer than the traditional styles. I have theories on that, but don't have enough data that's not anecdotal to back it up. But I think casual weddings where everyone is relaxed, happy, and having a good time because the wedding is about celebrating rather than the ceremony will last the longest. A sense of humor helps. If both the bride and groom are relaxed and silly with one another, those last the longest. Opinion. Cheesy themes often reflect shared interests, showing a deep understanding of each other's passions and a strong compatibility, in my opinion. So it only makes sense that those marriages tend to last longer. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell button to receive notifications to my latest videos.